Take this on now with Ahmed Bayram, who's the Middle East spokesperson for the Norwegian Refugee Council, joins us now from Amman. Ahmed, thanks for joining us here on Al Jazeera. It is a truly dreadful, shocking situation. What do you make of this tiny trickle of aid that's going in and the fact that even that is all being kept in the south?
I think it's causing a lot of chaos. It's causing a lot of desperation on top of the anxiety that we've had for 81 days. Israel's drip, supply of aid is actually confusing people waiting for bread, that loaf of bread, which Israel has been keeping from them, only for Israel to open the gate and then close them again and allow very, a fraction of what is actually needed. What we need now is not just, that switch to keep, flicking on and off. We need Israel to keep the gates open for hundreds and thousands of trucks to arrive. I think, again, the siege has been lifted in name only. The blockade has been lifted in name only, particularly with the north, as we've heard in your reporting, having received zero aid. And I was speaking to a colleague this morning, and she was telling me about how 1 kilogram of onions now costs around $50. So. No, it's not working.
And that $50 is well beyond the means of pretty well everybody within the Strip, I guess. So people are improvising, aren't they, to try and stay alive? How are they doing that?
They are, and they are making bread out of lentils or dried ground beans or pasta. Noodles or whatever they can get their hands on. I've heard, of course, we've all heard about people consuming tree leaves and grass to keep going, about bags of flour that are infested with bugs, being made into bread. These are all stories we hear, and kids keep asking, what are we going to have today? Some children don't forget they are too young to know what's going on. And particularly when they get hungry, they don't understand that there's tons of aid waiting across the border while they can't get their daily intake. Just one more actually testimony. I've heard from a colleague saying that if you consume one meal a day now, you're amongst the luckiest.
Indeed, and for some children, of course, this life of hunger and violence is pretty much all they've known, and they're really suffering.
It is, and psychologically or physically, some of them might never make it. Let alone the starvation cases we see and children reportedly dying from starvation. Imagine in this time and age. Also the mental scars of that, even the malnutrition, the malnourishment could be irreversible in some cases. Your body organs are wasting away. You're getting smaller as a child instead of growing. It's a childhood taken away from them, and in a lot of cases they're dying a slow death, literally. Again, while so much food waits across the border.
What is your sense as to why Israel is blocking what aid there is going north? Is it to try and draw people down to the south and then keep them there?
It seems that it's one of the publicly declared aims. Of course, we think that providing aid to one area above the other, as opposed to all areas, is a coercive measure to forcibly displace people, which Israel has been doing all this time, of course. But what we're hearing, the explanations coming out of northern Gaza is that this is actually the strategy. And if you look at the Gaza, for example, areas like Gaza City, it's now full of tents that are being installed in the middle of the street. There's no space left. So, Israel's controlling aid, whether in part or in the entire aid system, is dangerous and should not be accepted, let alone allowed by its allies for 81 days. So, we think Israel is an occupier in this scenario, and it should not control aid provision to people, let alone life-saving aid such as food and water.
Right, well, there's no sign of it letting up. It's a terrible situation, Ahmed, but thanks for just filling us in with a full picture. Ahmed Bayram from the Norwegian Refugee Council. Thank you.
Thank you.
In Israel, thousands of protesters are demanding the government reach a deal for the release of the remaining captives held in Gaza. Relatives of the captives say they're increasingly worried about the fate of their loved ones. Here are many of those relatives and others demonstrating on the streets of Tel Aviv. Negotiations to return the captives and to stop the war have stalled. For the very latest, let's cross to Hamdah Salhut in Amman. She's in the Jordanian capital because, of course, the Israeli government has banned Al Jazeera from reporting inside Israel and the occupied West Bank. So what have we been hearing about the captives' families?
Well, the family members of Israeli captives say they're protesting not just in Tel Aviv, but across the country to try and put that pressure on the Israeli government to enter into a deal that would see the release of the remaining 58 captives. But they say that no matter what, the Israeli prime minister is not interested in a deal. There have been a lot of family members speaking out earlier in the day. They hold a weekly press conference to essentially try and get their messaging out there, not just to the Israeli public, but to the world, to try and get people to understand what it is they're going through, saying that their government doesn't hear them, that it's been nearly 600 days, and that they have no sort of hope of a ceasefire deal coming into effect because they accuse the prime minister of prolonging the war for his own personal and political gain. Now, according to Israeli intelligence, of those 58 captives still held in the Gaza Strip, at least 20 are alive and the rest are presumed deceased.
Hamdah, Benjamin Netanyahu seems to act almost in defiance of protesters like this. What's the political calculation here, and what is the political situation as far as he is concerned?
Well, just earlier tonight, the family members of captives say that Netanyahu is choosing a long political war over the release of the captives, as we were just mentioning, prolonging the war for his own personal and political gain. And remember that the Israeli premier has just appointed a new head of security, a new Shin Bet chief, who has been said to not want exactly a captives deal, instead wanting this sort of military pressure and escalation in the war, which is why Netanyahu appointed those, of course, according to the family members of captives. But there's a lot of pressure on Netanyahu. Remember, there's been a lot of international pressure in the last couple of weeks to try and get Israel to, one, end the blockade of humanitarian assistance, but two, to stop the war altogether and the expanding military operations. The military says that all of the brigades that have been called up for the expansion are now operating inside of Gaza. And what the family members of these hostages say is that this added military expansion and military pressure is only killing the captives. But Netanyahu is part of the most right-wing government in Israel's history who have largely been against any sort of ceasefire deal, largely been against any sort of end to the war. And Netanyahu's political allies, some of which have even left the government previously earlier in the year when there was a ceasefire deal, many have threatened to leave if there was an end to the war. So there are a lot of moving parts for Netanyahu politically. And remember that to the Israeli delegation, it's now back in Israel after nearly a week of negotiations in the Qatari capital, Doha, but still at a stalemate because Netanyahu has said that there are new conditions for ending the war. It's not just Hamas disarming, it's not just an exile of political and military leaders, but it is also the complete expulsion of the Palestinians from the Gaza Strip. He says that he's only going to end the war if Trump's plan goes into effect. This is something that has been dismissed largely within the international community. Many have said that it amounts to ethnic cleansing, but Netanyahu says that that's one of his conditions for ending the war. So a lot of moving parts in Israel politically, but nonetheless, it doesn't seem like we're anywhere near the end of this war.
Indeed. All right, Hamdah, we'll leave it there. Thanks for that, Hamdah Salhut there in Amman.